Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining here. One of our Friends of Korea webinars. It's been a little while since we've had one for the summer, but we're back for the fall. So I'm very excited to be here again with you all and with our speaker. To get started right off the bat, let me introduce Dr. Ramon Pacheco Pardo. He's a professor of international relations at King's College London and the KF-VUB Korea Chair at the Brussels School of Governance at Vrije Universiteit, which I think I pronounced hopefully correct. I looked it up. He's also King's Regional Envoy for East and Southeast Asia. Professor Pacheco Pardo he has a very illustrious group of titles here. He's a non-resident adjunct fellow with the Korea Chair at CSIS, scientific council member at Elcano Royal Institute and committee member at CSCAP EU. He has also held visiting positions at Korea University, Kuan University School of Public Policy, and Melbourne University. Importantly today, Professor Pacheco Pardo is here to talk about his new book, which is co-authored with Professor Victor Cha, entitled Korea, A New History of South and North. So welcome, Professor Pacheco Pardo, and thanks so much for speaking with us here today.
Thank you for the invitation, and thanks to everyone for joining today.
Yeah, so if I can just get us started, can you please introduce the book briefly? Tell us a little bit about what you were trying to get across with this new book that you worked on with Professor Cha.
Sure. So this book is a collaborative project, as you mentioned, with Professor Cha or Victor. I guess the thinking behind it is to want to produce a text that could be used by students, by professionals who don't necessarily know much about Korea and want to get an introduction to the history of the two Koreas from the late 19th century all the way really to last year when it was published, right? And then the thinking behind having an American author and a European author is that we have different approaches to our understanding of Korea. Victor, of course, has studied in the government. Victor, of course, is American scholar, right? He works at CSIS at Georgetown University. So, in a sense, he gets the American perspective on Korea, alliance-centric, security-centric, obviously not more Korean-American, so there's a people-to-people link. Now, here in Europe, our history relations with Korea is really not as long-standing as strong, right? So the thinking was we could combine the American and the European view, and this would allow us to give a different perspective that hasn't been presented yet.
Yeah, so thank you so much for your introduction. In a way, it's kind of cool. I see this as kind of like the stream team collaboration between you and Dr. Cha, as you mentioned. He's written some of the definitive books on North Korea, and of course, as I have here, not to promote too much, this is your book on South Korea, so The Shrimp and the Whale, which everybody here should know, the reference there. You've written this definitive book on South Korea. So how did you approach this combination of, Victor Cha being this expert on North Korea, has written these books before, and you have your background on South Korean history as well. How did you approach that collaboration?
Yeah, so first of all, sorry about the noise. I was coming to the room last minute, so I had to move. But I'm speaking a bit more loudly now. So basically, my just like I focus more on South Korea, right? I work on North Korea, but my expertise is really South Korea. Victor, of course, has a long-standing relationship with North Korea as an academic and worked in government as well, an experience that I don't have. So the thinking was we can combine our knowledge, right, and our expertise and our focus, mine more on the south, his more on the north, right? And we built on our own experience as well. So Victor, for example, in the book, he talks about his interactions with North Korean officials. In my case, I focus more on liking South Korea, for example. I used to live there in the past. I'm really into the book. Obviously, Victor has experience in South Korea, so if I'm going to say that we divided this evenly 50-50 and that was it, we took from each other, right? We learn from each other, so to speak. And what you see here as well is that what we did is that we try to have history on both Koreas at the same time. So rather than having a chapter in North Korea, a chapter in South Korea, we had chapters on Korea when it was unified, and after that, we had a book, chapter from the division of Korea into two, in which we do it with South Korea and North Korea at the same time, not in separate chapters. And we thought this works better because you can compare the trajectory of the two Koreas, and you make the readers understand that even the fact that diverged from the division of Korea into two countries planned today, in spite of this division, there are commonalities that you can also bring into the chapters, and this is what I tried to do. We talked about the differences, but also the commonality between both of them. And that was very important for us to do, to explain that even though Korea is divided today, have a long history of a unified country, and the final chapter we talk about potential integration between both of them.
As I said, you're based in Europe, based in the UK, and for this book, you guys have talked to a wide range of audiences all over the world. You even mentioned in the introduction about your experiences, expressing interest in Korea and being met with confusion or lack of resources in Spain back in the day. So how did that shape your approach other than, for your work and for the book?
Yes, we do work on that. I'm getting closer now as all of this. Yes, I think for that. I mean, I think that was quite important. In my case, I first lived in South Korea in Seoul as a student, right? And you're right. When I went to South Korea for the first time, 2003, 2004, Asia, never mind South Korea, was a big unknown in Spain and in Europe as a whole, right? So in a sense, going to somewhere like South Korea, right? Not even, let's say, China, for example, which with a bigger economy, bigger content of the population, where people in Europe maybe know a bit more the history about China. And I wouldn't say we're an adventure, because at the end of the day, it's a patient developed country, but it's true that it was not common back then. Now it has completely shifted, of course, because we have K-pop, we have K-dramas, we have much more tourism, many more students going to South Korea. So clearly there is much more interest than in the past. Now, back then, I won't say my friends were surprised that I had the interest in South Korea because the history of South Korea and Spain, my home country, is quite similar. We were poor countries after a civil war. We not only were poor, but we were dictatorships. Then we became richer countries. They became also democracies. Our cultures also became more known after our home country. So from that perspective, I think people understood what I could be interested. But it is true that the thinking was like, why would you go to Asia, South Korea? Why don't you go to Latin America? Why don't you go to other countries, Europe? Why don't you go to North Africa, like closer countries to Spain, closer countries to Europe? And back then there were no books, for example, on South Asia they could rely on. There was the favorite Lonely Planet book, but that's a tourist book, for example. So already back then my thinking was maybe one day I can write a book for the history of free, right? Because I couldn't do any material when I did my copy period. I had to learn the go. This was early 2000, so the internet was kind of new in Spain, so you couldn't even go into Google and search in all the country. So my approach was, okay, let's see what happens. Then I go to South Korea. Let's see what can I learn in this country that is far away from Europe, right? From a different culture, a different tradition, different history, of course, because it is in a different region. What can I learn from it? And maybe what can I bring to the friends that I'm going to make in Korea? And this has always been my approach. And this is something that talking to this story, we try to bring it to the book as well, right? So the book is very much based on this idea that we have to treat South Korea as any other country, not better, not worse. Sorry, same for South Korea, not better, not for North Korea, not better, not worse, but a country that you need to understand, that you can ask questions about, and that you can bring your own understanding about your home country, about global politics, about relations with the country onto the book.
Yeah, so on that note, I'm curious how responses have differed as well from different audiences, both geographically, with a range of interests, academic, general public. You've mentioned that you want to make something that, various people can get something from, right? And I also have to point out one of the endorsements, the blurbs, that you see on the book. We have Ban Ki-moon, but that's not as important. We have our very own Kathy Stevens, who has a blurb on the book, and she said, foreign policy experts and K-pop fans alike will enjoy and benefit from this book. So can you talk a little bit about how the responses have been from different audiences, whether it's different geographic audiences or, people with different interests?
So it's interesting because 70-80% of the audiences in Europe, we have presented that in UK, Spain, France, or Germany, for example, Belgium as well. And in the US, we're interested in the culture, K-pop, K-drama. That was the starting point, especially the younger audiences, but even, older audiences. That was the starting point. That's what they wanted to come to this talk. That's what they wanted to read the book. Then 20-30%, they were interested in technology. Maybe your Samsung, LG, they were interested in North Korea, right? Maybe they were interested in because they have been to the country, visited, not only South Korea, not too much North Korea. They had children living there because as well. For example, parents that wanted to understand why their children were not children, adult children, of course, they were in love with this country, why they wanted to live there. But really, 70%, I would say, K-pop, K-dramas, right? So the questions that you get from many people is how did it come about, right? In a country that was not traditionally known for its modern culture, its contemporary culture. But also you get people who, because that's their entry point, they have questions about the politics of the country, the economics. They want to learn about it because they don't know enough. Of course, they know Thompson, like I mentioned, they know LT, they know Conde, right? But they don't know the history of the country in detail. They don't know how everything combines. And that's why we factor into the book. So we do combine the culture, the politics, the economics, and the foreign policy, as you mentioned. And that's why we're very pleased when Kathy Stephen came with that blurb, actually. Very kind of her. Because that's what we try to achieve, actually. We try to achieve a book that, you're like, for fun, great. You may know more about it than we do, but, you don't necessarily know the politics, etc., right? Now, you may know about the technology of the country, but you don't really follow the culture. So you can also learn about the culture, how everything comes together. And that was quite important for us. Obviously, when we presented the book in Seoul, very different because everyone had a different interest. Many they wanted to know how it's their country, right? For South Korea, but also the North as well, and some others, right? They they were foreigners living in Korea. They had a interest in the country because they were already living there. Diplomats, for example, business people that were tender, like expats, for example. So different responses in which country, but a common thread of more people being interested in the culture, and something that Victor and I have noted that compare when you give an academic talk, compare when you talk to government officials, or the questions are very different, very different approach, very different perspective. And later for them is their job. They don't have an interest in Korea, but this is their job. And the people that come to our talk when we present the book, it is a hobby, right? So it's different. And it's very enjoyable, I would say, because people generally want to learn more about Korea. It makes for a very interesting discussion with them.
All right. You mentioned something there that I kind of want to follow up on, which I found really interesting. And I had to make a note of myself when I was introducing the book, because naturally I would say Korea, a new history of North and South, right? Like normally that's just kind of naturally how it rolls off the tongue, I guess, especially in English. Was that deliberate that it is called a new history of South and North, right? So what was the kind of thought process behind the title there?
Absolutely, was deliberate. As you can imagine, completely agree. North and South would be the logical way to go, right? I mean, we wanted to make 2 points, I think. The first point that we wanted to make is that there's more information about the South. So, current information about the South, especially contemporary era. And when we want to talk about the culture, politics, different dynamics, the South today is better known, right? Already security-wise, maybe the North is better known than the South. But when we talk about the politics of the country, economic development, the big companies that we know for, never mind the culture, the South is better known. So we wanted to make this point, right? That the South today more open, better known. You can have many more first-hand experiences with the South, and including for readers, very few of them have been to North Korea. Americans, for example, like you know better than I do, is this account even go to North Korea, right? That's the first point. The second point that I think we wanted to make is that we we find the South more interesting. Maybe that's the way of putting it, right? More interesting in the sense that many more things to explore, when it comes to the south or when it comes to the north. Probably because of what I mentioned, the open to the country or not, but also related to the data that you can access, but also how global South Korea has become. North Korea is global in its own way, but South Korea is global in many different ways. I wanted to make this point as well.
So then I find it interesting too. You devote an entire chapter to the issue of unification, to possibilities, complications, really digging into what that would mean, both at where we are kind of at this moment, but also what it would mean and different possibilities for that. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you think about this issue, especially in a book that's explicitly about this, very divided peninsula?
The first point we wanted to make is that we think reunification will happen at some point. Maybe not in 10 years, maybe not in 20 years, but if you look at the history of Korea as a unified country, we're talking about hundreds of years, right? So we wanted to make that point. We also wanted to make the point that there are very different scenarios for reunification and very different visions for reunification, right? So there is the more liberal vision in Korea, there's the more conservative vision, but there are many visions in between. There's the younger generation who, yes, they may believe not as much as the older generation reunification, but they have their own views about if this happens, how it should happen, right? And that's what we wanted to do with the chapter. We actually wanted to show that different visions, different ways of approaching reunification, we think will happen at some point. And we need to understand this. It's not enough to say, well, the liberals think it will happen this way, this we should accept it as it is. The conservative think it will happen this way, let's accept it as it is. The older generation thinks it happen this way, so the younger generation should just follow what they think, or vice versa. And that's the point we're trying to make with that chapter.
Yeah, and then moving through, you also have kind of this chapter at the end where you end by looking ahead, saying the last few years have, quote, served to make clear the growing divergence between the two Koreas. So where do you see us going from here? And are there any places we should be paying particular attention as people who are obviously interested and invested in the present and future of both of these countries?
That's a very good question. It's different for the North and the South, as you can imagine, right? For the North, many here in Europe, we believe that we should engage with North Korea, robust engagement, explain where we disagree with North Korea, nuclear weapons, human rights abuses, North Korea support for Russia. But the thinking in Europe, which I share, and I represent the European view, is that we should try to engage with North Korea as much as possible, especially in our that some European embassies are starting to go back to the North, and then North Korea has started to rotate its diplomat to Europe, and it's talking potentially about coming new meetings again with Europeans, right? Later on, of course, with Americans and other countries as well. Having said that, I'm pessimistic on the short-term future for North Korea. I think repression is going to continue. We don't see why Kim Jong-un to change his policy, even if Trump were to win the U.S. election. Why would he tend to his repressive approach to domestic politics, his nuclear program, his link with China, his link with Russia? So I'm pessimistic in that sense, but believing that in the long term, engagement may kill the balance in moving North Korea in a different direction, but it will take a long period of time. Of course, this is also informed by the way Europeans engage with Central Eastern Europe, and eventually this led to the end of communism in Central Eastern Europe, and these countries today are part of the European Union, part of NATO, working very well with Western Europe, right? For the South, very multifaceted. I mean, if we look at economic, record investment into South Korea last year, a growing number of trade partners, Southeast Asia, Europe, not the traditional one, China, US, Japan. If we look at the culture, I mean, every year better, actually. Some people say, where is the peak of Hallyu, of the Korean way? Well, it hasn't really peaked. Next month in Madrid, we have the KDS Music Bank coming for the first time to Spain because Spanish audiences are in love with K-pop. Unthinkable 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Not from back in the US, of course, right? If you look at Korean companies, becoming, depending on so many different areas, technology, etc., right? So I think great future for South Korea and at the domestic level. Of course, there are divisions in South Korea, but I don't have to tell you in the US that the divisions are just in South Korea also exist in Europe, right? Exist in your own country, right? Exist in so many different countries. So I think there are ways of overcoming them, and I think that's something that has to happen in the KF period as well.
Yeah, of course, I can't let you go without asking about Hallyu, which is my personal interest. Well, as a fan of a lot of Korean popular culture personally, and academically very interested in both the phenomenon itself and a lot of social issues tied up with the popularity of South Korean popular culture abroad and different things like that. But also the issue of soft power, right? Which South Korea is very invested in, their public diplomacy outreach and using this opportunity that they've been granted by such amazing, popular culture and the popularity of it abroad. As you mentioned, Hallyu, the Korean wave, has shown no signs of stopping yet, right? Despite people predicting it for a long time. So can I ask you, what do you think about this, both this growing wave and what it means for, South Korea and their policy, and their policies abroad?
I like your comment because I created in South Korea in 2003 in Seoul, right? And people were saying, oh, this is the peak of value, with history, some of the movies coming out, Green Persona, the drama Boa, oh, this is the peak of it. It's not going to get any bigger. Then Canon Fell came along, or this is the peak of value, and now I think it will continue. And for most Europeans and many of the audiences we've seen, because sometimes, readers are very nice. They can, from Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia, right? This is the entry point of their interest in South Korea. And I don't see it going away. Because especially if you look at younger people, they're more willing to consume culture in a foreign language compared even to my generation, we're around in the 40s. Then we're Spanish culture and some English and those bits. But now you see people willing to explore other languages. Easier, of course, because they can access it through the internet. YouTube, of course, is great for reviews by K-pop fans, and this was not possible in the past. If you don't go to a radio station and listen to a song in Korean, right? It just didn't happen. But they can be more proactive in how they approach it. And because I think the South Korean government has been very good at using this for soft power purposes, as you were mentioning, right? I never believe some people say that South Korean doesn't create a value, but certainly has helped the spread of value. The example of the nation, KBS Music Bank, the North Korean national TV network, sponsoring for decades, really now, I think 20 years, the music contract across the world, and in China, in Latin America, in different parts of Europe as well. That's it in the past as well, for example, right? So it's helping a lot, and South Korea knows how it can use its power. To the extent that, for example, in Europe, sometimes I talk from government officials from different countries. And the question that they have is, how can we have our own Hallyu? How can we have our own Korean wave? How can we have a conversation with Polish government officials recently, right? How can we have a Polish wave, right? So you see the interest coming from overseas, not only the cultural phenomenon per se, but the soft power phenomenon that you mentioned. How can other countries replicate this? And I think that what explains the enduring relevance of Hallyu. And I don't want to focus on the young people because, for example, when you have the stuff, when you look at drama, many people following Korean drama, many are starting the COVID-19 pandemic, but even before, they're older. In the 40s, in the 50s, they have found an interest in, right? So we students, repeaters start to say, oh, this is something that teenagers follow, and that's it. They grow out of it. That's certainly not the case. If you look at Korean movies, right, very well recognized by audiences of all ages, especially teen lovers that are willing to go beyond your smash hits that make them out of Hollywood or some European country. So that's also part of this red feature.
All right. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to either raise your hand or put them in the chat. If you want to just type out your questions, I can read them for you. That's no problem. But I want to, I meant to look this up before we started, but do you have the book in Korean as well, or do you have plans to translate it into Korean? And I'm curious, I mean, we talked about all the, different audiences, but I specifically want to ask about, Korean audiences, and if you've talked to them about, this book that's about them, but also about, the neighbors to the north and about the global spread of interest in the Korean Peninsula, and how have Koreans responded to your work and to this book, and yeah, also I don't know if you're publishing it in Korean as well.
So the book is yet to come out in Korean in picture South and North. It is to come out in Korean. I guess at some point it will, but we have presented it in been told, as I mentioned previously. We have an interview about it, and we have talked to Korean overseas, right? Who also came to our talks and talked about it. In general, I think they appreciate that because both of us are academics, we took great care when it comes to process. We took great care when it comes to making sure that we didn't make the statements that were then factionally about South, but especially about the North, because of course you can penalize the North in a way that sometimes, for example, media do, right? So we wanted to really avoid. Now, the reception has been positive for the most part. Of course, some people don't agree with all our takes on Korean history, and that's perfectly fine, right? They say, they may say, maybe it creates very effective people that can say in a very positive or very negative way. So it depends to you who you talk to the political lean. So not everyone agrees with everything. As we said, some people say maybe you're too positive for the present and future of South Korea, right? You have a more negative view about where we are heading, right? We talk of, in Korea about how we reach peak Korea in economic terms and cultural terms, for example, right? Now, my other book, 50 Well, has been translated into Korean, earlier this year. And the perspectives have been very positive. And I think Koreans, they appreciate having non-Koreans write in other country. And I have to say, not many Europeans write about other countries. Normally, Koreans or Americans, for good reason, completely understandable, right? So they do appreciate the fact that we have to move for Europe and extend. Because as I said, my taking is slightly different, not really focus on the alliance, not to focus on the people-to-people links that doesn't have with Korean Americans, for example, or even with Korean other people, if they're only in the US, of course, right? Very much treating Korea like any other country as a foreigner would deal with it, right? And they do appreciate that. Similarly, some of them think I'm too positive, some of them I think I'm too negative for the country. That's normal. But in general, I believe they are nice to me in saying, oh, we think you're more neutral objectives than a Korean offer. I don't know if it's true or not, and maybe they're just being nice to me, but that was my intent. And certainly with the book that we wrote with Victor, the same intent. Be as neutral as objective as possible. Don't demonize the North to the extent of, you know, the South being presented in such a positive light that they look like day and night, or yin and yang, if you want to put it this way, right? We certainly try to avoid this, and I think audiences believe that we have been able to achieve that.
All right. So I think maybe what we'll do is I'll ask you kind of a wrap up question, and then we might let everybody get going. And then, like I said, we'll have the recording, which I think we'll be able to fix the audio, and we have the captions as well, which is, I think, helping. But in any case, just to wrap up, what are your next plans? So you have obviously Shrimp to Whale, now the new history. What's next in this trilogy, or what else have you not gotten to put out there that you think is like a missing component of our understanding about Korea and the peninsula broadly? Is there anything that you think is still missing in this conversation?
So, not my idea, but I do not hope to write a book about Hallyu from an academic perspective, but for the general public. Where did it come from? Where is it headed? I'm not sure I'm going to write about that, but I do understand why publishers think that that's the missing link because of what I explained before. Because most audiences, that's their entry point to Korea, certainly to South Korea, right? I want to take a rest, to be completely honest, after having published the two books and enjoy the big book, which is the nicest part that you all know from writing a book, is meeting the reader, hearing from them, especially that most of them are nice, not everyone, but most of them are nice, right? So enjoy that. Enjoy presenting the book in Europe, in the US, maybe back in Korea. That's part of the thinking. But eventually, I'm very intrigued about this idea of having a book on value, which is academically informed, but again, for the general public, because it is true that most books on this topic either are journalistic in nature, which is perfectly fine, of course, or academic in nature, which is perfectly fine. So trying to match both of them. And I think that, yes, that would be interesting. That would, how they say, oh, young people don't read anymore. Clearly not our experience. Our young people, if there's a topic that interests them, they were very up our course. Many young people are super interested in Korea. And then I'm interested in the fire. So I would assume that they would be interested in this topic. So that could be the next step. But, still discussing with publisher, trying to find the time and I'm really trying to enjoy the book that already came out the last year, but the week before.
Well, after you get a rest, give me a call. I'll read all your book with you. So thank you so much for your time. I know you're very, very busy and we're catching you in the evening, UK time there. So thank you again for, finding the time to speak with us. And like I said, we'll be in touch with the recording. And so everybody can go back and learn more. And of course, I put in the chat, let me just recopy it for everybody. If you're interested in the book, I put the Amazon link. Of course, you can please, feel free to buy it at a local bookstore as well, or online anywhere. So, but thank you, Professor Pacheco Pardo, for joining us today, and hopefully we'll be in touch again in the future.
And another, thanks for the invitation. Yeah, I apologize for the background noise. Anyway, I didn't do it that I could, but they wouldn't let me use the room that I was promised. But yes, anyone feel free to reach out with any questions, of course. And yeah, hopefully in the future, when even maybe with Victor, can have another one with proper sound as well. But thank you everyone. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation, again.